everyone. We're not actually going to introduce each other at all. Here we are, Ryan, lending cultural credibility to a big art fair in Miami. And we've got a seriously diminished audience compared to the previous panel. I can only assume it's because they need time out after that knowledge transfer. And they do. So congratulations on Meme in Miami. It's fantastic. And it's a hugely ambitious piece for 28 dancers plus yourself. Incredibly complicated structure that I know has taken weeks and months to sort out. And I know new to audience members get the same journey through it. So I thought I'd just start by asking how many people in the audience have seen it?
Or in it.
Or in it, yeah. Good. So the majority of the audience are coming to find out more. And who are going to see it tonight? A handful of people. Okay, so it'll be a sort of trailer giveaway for activities later this evening. So I guess I wanted to start by just breaking down maybe the title, Meme, a story ballet about the internet. And just to start on a very self-centered note, a couple of years ago I wrote an article in our forum called Digital Divide about why so few artists are dealing directly with the internet. And it got a lot of kickback, and a lot of people criticized me for not dealing with new media art and digital art and internet art and so on. And I wasn't necessarily talking about using technology, but reflecting in whatever medium on what the internet is doing to our modes of attention, our experience of the world, and so on. So I find it very interesting that you're using this, what would say, an obsolete medium of the story ballet to deal with our experience of the internet. So the way, in particular, the way cultural information is circulated and distributed, and in the process, perhaps also leveled. So the first question really is, why a story ballet? Why use this antiquated form to talk about the latest digital technology?
Right. Well, I think what's so interesting about story ballets is that they actually really don't tell a story. It's that you know the story, and so you can sort of lay it on top of this the movement that you're seeing in front of you. I mean, if you don't know these, if you don't know Swan Lake, you can't actually follow the story on there. So it's much more abstract than it's sort of made out to be, and the sort of I feel like the kickback sort of against having narratives in dance were I think somewhat not really justified, because it was an abstract way of sort of telling something. It was that they were using tales that people knew, but there's actually, I mean, it's a really difficult thing to translate a narrative into movement. And so I thought that I kind of came up watching dance in an era in which narrative was looked down upon, and so I didn't see the story ballets. And then I started going. I said, these are the most bizarre things. They're so strange. I also don't know a lot of the sort of. I didn't know the stories behind them, so they looked very abstract to me, and so I thought that it made sense to kind of take what I saw as a very abstract form, and look at how they dealt with narrative.
But all the same, you're importing familiar stories into that structure now.
Right.
Except they're now pop videos and other forms of historical dance, as well as more contemporary forms of choreography.
Right. And so yeah, still kind of having those same sort of known forms that are informing the work. But for me, it was interesting to sort of think about how I could take this thing that's usually a linear narrative, which is the traditional way of telling a story, and sort of import kind of the architecture of the internet into it, which is for me is a much more rhizomatic experience of sort of clicking, and it's kind of happening all over the place, rather than just going kind of plowing through. And so that was a starting point of making this piece and creating that structure. Is how would I do that? How would I take that architecture and sort of and put it into a live space?
Okay, so I want to come back to these ideas of how we navigate the internet and modes of attention in a moment. But first, can you just tell us something about how you develop the choreography in each of the different sequences that we see as we're moved around the space?
I've been working with dancers in New York now for about 5 years. A lot of them are here. And I never had really done a piece in which I would consider myself the choreographer. And so when I was given this opportunity, I thought, all right, it's time. It's time for me to sort of dive in and actually spend time in the studio with dancers, creating something. But I knew I wanted to work with these dancers in small groups. It was going to be a large cast, but I wanted it to be in small groups. And I wanted the pieces, sort of the pieces within the piece, to look very diverse. And so one way I kind of devised to create that is I asked the dancers to bring in 3 video clips of movement that they responded to somewhere online. So it ranged from Janet Jackson videos to orangutans playing to American Bandstand from the 60s, story ballets. So that kind of was a way of having a launching point that would be diverse. What I found interesting though is everyone really loves, no matter what their training is, loves music videos and pop dancing. So that ended up being a big part of it. No matter what their background was, everyone wanted to be Madonna.
And so, so I recognized, actually last time I saw it a year ago, I recognized bits and pieces, like fragments of Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights video or Beyonce's Single Ladies. Last night I couldn't recognize so many things.
Right.
Could you talk us through some of the videos that are used as a starting point?
Yeah, so my interest necessarily is not in sort of pastiche. It's more about using these as kind of source material that then are expanded, contracted, slowed down, made bigger, made smaller. So when the 3 guys come on stage at first, very slow, that whole kind of phrase takes about 5 minutes, and it's about a 3-second clip of Tina Turner and the Ikettes from 1972 that we expanded into 5 minutes and added nuance to. So there's moments that I think are where there's something somewhat recognizable about it, but the idea isn't necessarily like we went from Janet Jackson to Balanchine to Jerome Robbins, and there's a little Trisha Brown. It's just sort of you have the kind of feeling of those things, and there's some moments more obvious than others, which is then I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but then is contrasted with the direct quote, which is at the end, the Martha Graham quote, which is within the piece. It's all of these things that are based on previously existing material, but then I wanted to contrast that with actually having a quote, meaning a movement that was done by a company. And so,
but it's just to be picky. Is quote really the right word there? I mean, it's a wholesale appropriation. That
right. Well, I mean, it's like
it's collage. You're taking a pre-existing thing and inserting it there, whereas all of the other movements are adapted.
Exactly. Yeah. No. And this is, I mean, literally, it's like, I almost asking for an Martha Graham intervention into my piece. Just sort of here's your time. Put your piece in there, and then we pick up again.
So again, a year ago, you've changed the ending a lot from last year.
Right.
So the finale last year culminated in Martha Graham Company, of, what, 20 dancers or so?
11, yeah.
Okay, it felt like 20.
It's a small stage.
11 or so coming onto the stage and doing a group section of what? I can't remember.
Salutation to the Sun.
Salutation to the Sun. And now it ends with just one dancer, Miki Okihara, doing Deep Song from 1937.
Right.
And I'm curious why you chose that piece, because from a little bit of Googling earlier, I realized this is a piece done in response to the Spanish Civil War.
Right. And
which seems miles away from the rest of the things we've been looking at, which felt very contemporary.
Well, the piece that was done in the New York version, so we've done this twice, once in New York. And in New York, Salutation to the Sun it's a late Graham work. It's from '81. Many people say it's kind of, past her prime. But, I think it's just sort of like over the top glorious. I mean, there's gold lame, Halston unitards. They're amazing. But, I can see people's point. It's very, like, perhaps overly grand. But it puts a smile on your face, having those gold lame costumes come out at you. And I sort of realized as I was developing the new work, so this piece is an expanded version. As I was developing the new work and also the theater, there was sort of a kind of darkness in this version. So perhaps thinking about actually you speak about this in your article about how when the internet really first took off, it was, you know, this utopia was coming. You know, I mean, it was the information superhighway, and we had all these terms we don't, even World Wide Web, you know, we don't even use anymore. And so in a way that piece kind of had that feeling to me, that sort of overly optimistic, you know, just big grins and, you know, we're all coming together. And this time I realized, you know, that, yeah, there was sort of a more darkness to this piece. And so, yeah, I think that Deep Song, I mean, you know, it's a really political moment for Martha Graham. It wasn't just that piece, but she made a lot of anti-war pieces in that era. And I almost wore, I should have worn, I have tights that say anti-war on them. So I could have made a statement just here on stage with my tights.
Well, maybe this is an opportunity to talk about the role of leggings in the work. Because those of you who've seen it will know that there is a stunning range of legwear in this piece.
So we saved a never-before-seen pair just for Claire. A pair for Claire.
But what is the role of the leggings and the particular prints that you've chosen?
Right. So they're also somewhat like photographic, you know, and I feel like it's just sort of slapping these images onto other images, you know, in a way that is kind of a collage. It's sort of layering. Sometimes it makes complete sense. Sometimes it doesn't. You know, I think this time I got a little. It might be a little matchy-watchy. It's like, oh, this is a dark piece. You'll have bats on your, you know, I got a little.
But I remember you saying about 18 months ago to me when you were preparing the piece for Performer that, you know, you'd got a budget to buy leggings.
Yes.
And you really wanted this to be a piece that was located in a particular moment in time.
No, totally.
And what has happened to printed materials
digital
and
printing,
digital printing with leggings in the last couple of years is something that really dates the work.
I know. I hope this. You know, in 10 years, I hope this piece looks dated. You know, and yeah, I know. I mean, this is technology that didn't exist before. And now, not only does it exist, it's so cheap. You know, I mean, printing on fabric is sort of amazing. So you know, in a way, that digital printing is just sort of another kind of layer. Yeah. Hopefully this piece will look dated.
But it's also a reference back to the classic, you know, unitards.
Of course, right, yeah. Well, yeah, but they're not very classic.
Yeah,
in form, they're classic.
Trashy execution.
Right.
So tell me about your role in the piece, because you appear intermittently through it.
I do,
and I wonder whether you're, and your style of movement is quite different to the rest of the dancers.
Well, yeah, for many reasons.
And I wonder whether this is because you're seeing yourself as a sort of a kind of entropic viewer of the internet who's moving through these scenes or pages, whether you're a cipher for the audience or some other kind of third choreographic body that I can't define.
You know, I've described my role as sort of like is the glitch. So it's pieces, you know, I'm actually the only person in the world that knows the entire piece. No one's seen it other than me, including the people in it. So it's these, you know, it's little moments of different parts of choreography, but done with a body that's sort of barely living. So it's kind of this glitchy version of all of the pieces. It's a best of, worst of kind of.
But why?
I mean, for me, I mean, this is such a virtuosic piece. I mean, I have such amazing dancers sort of working, and again, I did another piece that sort of contrasted these two bodies as well, called Make Ryan a Dancer, in which I was at a PS1 for 5 months, learning how to dance for the public every day. And for me, I think that's always sort of amazing, this idea of, you know, two bodies doing the same movement, you know,
when doing it well, one
and
doing
they're
it badly.
absolutely not the same movement.
Yeah.
My first, there's the press image for Make Ryan a Dancer is the ballet dancer David Hallberg and I doing the same leg lift, but you know, his is here and mine's like there, you know, and so so I think it's sort of, you know, it's kind of interesting. I think at a certain point, all of this virtuosity, it's like almost you forget how amazing what they're doing is, you know, and so then you have this body that sort of flops out there, and you're like, oh wow, they're really good, you know.
Okay, so I guess this also contrasts to the viewers' bodies, which are extremely passive.
Right.
It's all. I mean, this is going to be a real spoiler for those of you.
Yeah,
who
close
are
your
going
eyes
to
if
see
you're
it
going, or close your eyes, close your ears if you're
Close
coming
your
tonight.
ears. But something very specific happens to the audience all the
Yeah.
way through this, which is that you are moved around by
Right.
chair movers into different positions around the theatre and the kitchen areas.
Right.
And so the viewer's body is very passive,
Right.
and this is in counter to most of the rhetoric across the 20th century, and especially more recently about viewer activation.
Right.
This idea of activated spectatorship, that there's something empowering about being, participating and making decisions for yourself within a work of art. So instead, this is a piece in which we're, as I say, it's like being in a wheelchair. We're not, we're in regular chairs, but we're moved around on wheels. We're utterly dependent on the chair movers. And this feels particularly frustrating in the first 20, 25 minutes while you're dispersing the audience to different stations. Where we're sort of systematically relocated and parked in front of a performance for a period that actually feels slightly too long.
Yeah.
And you usually maybe you'll see several cycles of it. And it creates this phenomenon of restlessness and sort of craned necks where you're constantly looking around to see what else there is to see, and a fear of missing out, basically. You'll think that there's going to be something else going on that actually would be more fun to look at than the thing you've already been enjoying for a substantial amount of time by that point. So are you surprised by how compliant people are by resting in the chairs, firstly? I've got a whole series of questions about viewers on the chairs.
Right.
Does everyone sit put?
Pretty much. I mean, I think that's another thing that, I think of as my role is, so basically I'm hiding the entire time because I'm under the stage or under the ramp. So I can't see what's going on. So I have no idea if the piece is turned into chaos. I'm waiting for that night that happens. We've done a lot to not make that happen. But I am always like, if I come out, maybe everyone's just sort of wandering around and they've kind of, given up. Does that work still?
Yeah, that's good.
Given up on actually, sitting in their chair. But, I realize it's the same, sort of traditional spectacle. You're in a chair, you don't do anything, the performer does a lot, and so actually we're not breaking that much of the sort of traditional relationship between spectator and performer. And so I think that's part of it, I mean, if we ask them to get up, that was why it was really important for me, and obviously this made this piece much more difficult, rather than just having people like, I don't know, telling them, okay, it's time for you to go over there. I think it's really, for me, it was very important to sort of have a very active passivity.
Yeah.
And so that's why, have these people sort of pushing you around.
But where did you get this? At what point in your conception of the work did you decide that that was going to be key? And was that one of the starting points, that you wanted to do a piece where the audience was moved around, or did the dancing component of it come first?
Well, I mean, I have to admit, it was actually probably somewhere around when you wrote your article. I think it's maybe start thinking about, I'm like, oh, that is interesting that people there isn't a lot of work about that as a concept. And so I really did start thinking about how would you translate that into what seems like a completely opposite experience, viewing a dance work live. And so, that I was trying to figure out what that kind of narrative structure would be. And for me, I knew that there had to be some sort of like changing of perspectives. So was that going to be actually, actually changing the entire room, around the audience, or was it going to be that they moved? And the network sort of that I could see in my head of these sort of bodies moving around, it really appealed to me that there would be this kind of structure that would happen, that would be another sort of choreography laid on top of the choreography that is as complicated and actually as trying for the performer.
But also, what's notable about it is that it's so low tech.
Yeah, right.
And so physical.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, there's
for something that's discussing a virtual spectatorship. It's a resolutely physical and material experience.
I've definitely kept it. The most high tech thing in the piece is speakers. And that was definitely by design. Yeah. I've even avoided any sort of projected image or anything like that, just to make it almost to play up the clumsiness of the analog. You know, I mean, it's like the digital can be clean, fast, you know, you click and you're there. With this, someone has to like get under you, push you over.
Sometimes with some help.
Sometimes they need help.
So there was one point when I was finally wheeled onto stage and I saw Jason dancing, and clearly the exertion was taking its toll, he was perspiring, but then I looked over and the chair mover was sweating just as much.
I know. No, they're really pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, you know, it plays, like, also just the close proximity to the performer, I think is really notable in the piece. But then someone comes actually behind you and is like inches away and they're sweating. So like just when you think like a performer's body can't get any closer, you actually have an even more intimate experience with a performer, which is the people mover. Yeah.
So how does this passivity of the audience in the chairs come back to this thinking about the internet and attention? Because it seems to me that your approach is somewhat contradictory in a good way, in that our relationship to images online is one of pleasure and immersion, but it's also one of a certain uncontrollability, you seem to be saying. So it's as if the web is controlling us, like the chair movers are controlling our perspectives, rather than us controlling it. Is that something you were trying to explore?
I mean, I think that, you know, actually, this wonderful artist, Annie Dorson, said something really amazing once. She was like, you know, on the internet, we're all, you know, we have so many choices in front of us, we're all really busy making the same decisions when we think that we're actually making vastly individual, you know, decisions. And I think that's a really interesting idea that, you know, in this kind of era of sort of personalization, you know, that actually, at the end of the day, we're all sort of doing the same thing. We're posting images of dinner, you know, we're sort of, and I think that's sort of amazing. And you know, there's a lot of energy put into making sure that we do that.
Highly individualized conformity.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So can I ask you about the difference between doing Meme in New York, where you did it as part of Performer, but also the audience was largely, when I say the performance community, people from visual art, dance, performance who were interested in performance, and so largely it's a performance for your peers and for people who are passionately interested in performance. From students through to performers. And then in Miami, it seemed to me the audience is quite different. It's largely I might say a collector audience. There's a lot of skinny women. There's some guys looking kind of bored, texting through it.
There's a lot of texting.
The mood seemed a little bit more serious compared to the delight that I felt people were experiencing in New York. So do these different audiences affect the meaning of the work for you? Or more accurately, I think, because I think the core meaning remains unchanged, but what are the different resonances that Meme acquires from being shown in Miami as an adjunct to an art fair rather than as part of a performance festival?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I assumed that from the beginning, and it has definitely proven to be true. They are very different audiences. Yeah, I mean, one, it's just, you know, with a piece like this with so many people, like, there's just the sort of dancer friend contingency, you know, takes up a lot of audience. And so we don't really know a lot of people here. And so that's been kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking that there was definitely more of a chance that there would be some wandering happening here. Because I think it's an audience that doesn't go see performance as much, so that they're the sort of, the rules and regulations of seeing performance are not sort of drilled into their brain as much. And they've
But that hasn't been the case.
No, it actually hasn't. There's definitely been, I mean, in New York, there was just as much sort of Instagramming. And I also thought, like, why do I need to put any technology in this? The audience will do it themselves, because I knew they were going to take photos the entire time. But yeah, I mean, it's one, there's a rowdiness to like, they make a lot more noise here. Some of it good, some of it bad. Some of it is just like laughing and crazy, and some of it's just like, you know, figuring out if they're going to go to the rally afterwards or something. So, I mean, I think what's interesting about this context and why I thought this piece kind of made sense here is that it is sort of about, you know, talks about sort of attention span. And we're plopped into, you know, the sort of center of fear of missing out. Like you're always at the wrong thing in Miami because everyone is trying to get into the, you're at this, but there might be something better going on. And so it's like a little microcosm, macrocosm thing. So, you enter into this piece, which is one event on your schedule, that then even gives you more anxiety about missing out. So that's the point. Basically, to make you feel horrible.
It intensifies,
yeah,
it exacerbates the fear of missing out that is endemic to Miami.
Right.
Okay. So you've already mentioned the piece you did at PS1 a few years ago called Make Ryan a Dancer.
Right.
And I just wanted to try and just hear your thoughts on how you situate meme in a sort of greater continuum of your work.
Yeah.
Because this takes place on a scale on which you hadn't previously operated. And so for people in the audience who might be unfamiliar with your work, can you talk about which pieces you feel it's a continuation of and which ones you've done since that you feel develop it?
Right. So I think, definitely like the piece that I mentioned, Make Ryan a Dancer, very obvious tie. I mean, one thing is I actually met a lot of dancers making that piece. And so that was, very directly related to that. So, that one's pretty obvious. But then I did a gallery show in New York called Still, in which the audience, it's not called an audience in a gallery. Yeah. They are? Okay. Anyways, so when they would walk in, I or Sam, who works with me, would introduce ourselves and say, basically what we had done, we created a performance still factory. And so we would work with the audience to come up with a performance still that hopefully looked like it came from an actual performance, but actually we're just setting up this still. So, the way that I see that kind of related is you were only allowed to go into this space if you were participating. We kindly asked you to leave if you weren't going to be in one of the stills. And so there was a huge audience that only experienced the show from images posted online, either that we posted or we then emailed images to people. And in a very similar way, I would say audiences see about a third of meme. Any individual audience. So the only way you really see it is from seeing images posted online. And so, or talking to someone afterwards. And I really liked this idea that, you went to go see a piece, and then when you leave, you realize you absolutely didn't see it because you're seeing all these images online that look nothing like your experience. And so that, I definitely see kind of a tie to that this kind of other way of experiencing the live, I'm trying to think, I can't remember anything else I've made.
The piece of the High Line.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, so, that was just me. Actually, the dancers are here. So actually, I mean, that piece kind of informed this piece as well. That was actually taking source material. I choreographed a dance that was, the soundtrack was the dancers reciting Jimmy Carter's Crisis of Confidence speech from 1979, which I think is a beautiful speech, but it's known as, a failure of a speech. Like probably it's considered, one of the worst received political speeches in the world just because Jimmy Carter was telling the truth. And so anyways, so the idea of kind of like layering this speech onto this, choreography, in a way that kind of didn't make sense. We really had like some big Fosse moments to this kind of dry speech about the energy crisis. So that sort of collision coming together. Also, there was, the High Line is long. And so it has a sort of Pied Piper effect where there's a dedicated audience that comes to see the piece, but then along the way, they're wearing unitards with Amy Carter on it. I wore my Amy Carter t-shirt. So people who are just visiting the High Line all of a sudden say, what is going on there? And so then they kind of join in. So it has this kind of, performance path in the same way that you kind of have this path within meme.
One last question, which I don't really know whether it's a valid question or not.
Great.
So you can just dodge it if you want to, but I'd rather you didn't.
Okay.
I want to ask you, I can't imagine a straight artist making this work, meme. And so there's
really?
something...
That's weird.
There's, you know, the leggings, the boys, there's, you know, the kind of the ballet, the choices of pop music. So can you talk about where you stand in terms of these labels?
Right. Well, I mean, you know, I'm a queer artist because I'm queer. And so...
Oh, you are? Oh, I wouldn't have... I wouldn't have associated you with that term. Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's not... It is funny. I definitely am not referred to that, like, you know, in articles or anything. Because I think that the sort of you know, sexuality sort of, you know, being sort of held, like it's not in your face dealt with, I think, in my work. But you're right, like the camp aspect, I mean, and I think another thing that was that like we just kind of live in sort of campy times. I mean, I feel like, you know, right now is like our sort of culture is run by like gay men and 11-year-old girls because they have the same taste, sort of. So, I mean, I could say like Miley Cyrus, you know, is like a perfect example. So I think that it's sort of like.
In what way? You mean culture?
Well, I just feel like, you know, right now, right? I just feel like right now that you know, it's a real, we're having a real pop moment. You know, I mean, it's like rock music sort of is laying low right now. It's yeah, it's a real sort of like pop, camp, over the top Nicki Minaj moment. You know, I mean, if you kind of like the pop stars now are like they're drag queens, you know, and it's amazing. It makes me very happy. So that there is that kind of like it's sort of taken over culture in a way, you know. So I think that that's sort of interesting that it kind of to be making this work in this moment, where I do see there is a shift. But you know, even if I made this piece, you know, 30 years ago, it still would have had sequins in it, you know, so.
Even if the leggings wouldn't have been quite as good.
Yeah, right, yeah, I guess they wouldn't have been.
I mean, I guess something else about camp aesthetics is it often circulates around the ideas of irony or sincerity.
Right.
But this seems to me quite a sincere piece.
Yeah.
And especially even though there is still a clash of tone when the Martha Graham dancer comes out at the end.
Right. Well, I think, I mean, I have, and I think many people now have, you know, sincerity and sort of irony. It's an odd relationship with it in which, you know, like you really, like, it's not just like it's so bad it's so good, that it's so bad that it's good. It's like, no, it's like it's so good that it's bad, that it's so good that it's bad and good. You know, like it's such a weird tangle of feelings. You know, like, you know, like there's this, like Dolly Parton, an amazing songwriter, singer, and isn't it great that, you know, she has that face and that makeup and all of those things. So there is this kind of, I feel like camp right now is in a sort of, it's almost like I don't want to use this term, but it's kind of like post-camp. It just is everywhere. Like camp just exists, it's everywhere. It's like, can't even feel it anymore. It's on TV. It's on. It's kind of everywhere in a way that it was kind of for like a small little community before, and it was a way of identifying your kind, is because, you know, you loved those campy things, but now everything is camp, you know, and so I think that's a weird camp explosion.
Yeah. So maybe my last question is about your music that you've put together, and I was impressed to find out you'd done all of that mixing and.
I did.
Composition of the music, you're all by yourself.
Yes.
Why does that? I don't know why that surprises me. I should move on quickly. But could you tell me about the choices of music? Because you haven't given in, at least not often, you don't give in to giving us the big vocal familiar song.
Right.
You're taking excerpts and teasing us and layering things into it. And they also go through different moods. There's quite a dark patch.
Right, there is, yes. Well, you know, I wanted there to be this kind of the same fragmented experience you're having visually through the music. And so, you know, what I find so amazing is that for a certain audience member watching Brandon and Andrew's piece, they think of Steely Dan. And so that piece has a very different feeling than when it's to Clips of Sierra, you know, it just has a very different feeling to it. And so also in a way that also means that no one can kind of place that piece because it looks so different with different music. And so, you know, like, oh, right, the two guys in the middle, that's a dark piece. You're like, what are you talking about? It's an uplifting piece. you know, and so I think that those kind of things. I mean, for me, I've seen all of the pieces to all of the music, so I don't have those associations. But I think that's a really interesting.
But you've
thing.
made a specific choice to only be using pop music, yeah? So because even though the movements are also derived from other forms of dance.
Yeah, there's a few moments. Well, I mean, almost. I mean, even it's even pop symphonic music. I mean, there's soundtracks to '60s movies that yeah, no, that is definitely true. I mean, I could come up with an idea, or I could just say that this is music I like, which is be much more honest.
Which is more honest.
So that's why.
So on that note, because we both talk very fast, I've now run out of questions, and I think we should open it to the audience.
Okay. Any questions? It's fine if you don't.
Come on. Don't be shy.
Look.
Good, thank you.
Yes. Oh yeah, we need to wait for that. I don't think it's on.
I don't hear the.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Wow.
Yeah, you guys were in Hong Kong recently.
Yes.
And how was the reaction to the people while you're there?
Right. So we did a piece. Oh, actually, it's another piece that's related to it, but it's post meme. So called Score, that has the same sort of ideas behind it, playing with attention span and pulling attention, and that situation was very different in that we came into a packed room, so it was almost like doing an intervention on an already existing event, and so I think that for that, again, that's a completely different context. And so that was people they were already milling around. And so we sort of like placed the performances within it. So in a way, it's almost the opposite of meme in a way, because the performers sort of moved around in the circuit that way. Again, that was a rowdy crowd too, Maybe just we're living like rowdier in the past year. Just everyone's gotten rowdier. I don't know. Yeah, right. Anyone else? It's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is it about it why do you enjoy making art with dancers, or why do you like working with dancers?
Right. This from one of the dancers. So for those of you who don't know, my background is in visual art. I studied photography, and performance just sort of infiltrated in through a series of accidents. And then I was started going to go see dance when I moved to New York, and mostly because one of the dancers, Kim Brandt, who's in the audience, started taking me to dance, and I really was excited by it. Felt completely detached from it, and actually at one point I was like, I think I love this world. I have no idea how I would enter it or how I would make a dance or anything, and Kim very generously was like, all right, well, I have a showing coming up, so we'll do it together. And so that was the first kind of collaborative piece that I'd made that involved dance. And then I just, 'cause I don't know, dancers are cool.
What did Kim get you to do? She got you to perform in her work.
Right. Well, we sort of, I don't know, we kind of developed it together through conversation. So one thing that was really interesting we had noted, and I bet this isn't even true anymore, but kind of our generation of dancers, you would constantly hear like, how did you get interested in dance? And they would say, Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation. And so, and it was like across the board, everyone did that. And so everyone knew this choreography because they learned it when they were 8 in their living rooms. And so we were, she was a part of a shared bill, and she was, again, just totally generously, just like, let's come up with something. And so we were at DTW, when it was DTW, which is, pretty, it's a real deal dance theater workshop, right? It's a real deal venue. In New York. So anyways, 3 of us were in the piece. David Velasco was in it too. And Silent looked like the staging looked like contemporary dance. And then all of a sudden we started moving, synchronized movement, but again, without music, it looked very different. And then there was that moment when everyone realized, oh my God, they're doing Rhythm Nation. But like it took so long because we just did it in silence. So it looked like, parts of it looked like modern dance. And so anyways, that was the first piece, was Rhythm Nation in silence.
But you still call yourself a visual artist, not a choreographer.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, even within this process, I sort of cringe at the term. I don't, even though I've been, at this point I see as much dance as I do visual art, I just don't have that sort of history in me. Like, I know art history much better than I know dance history. And so, I'm weary of being that artist that sort of parachutes into a world,
So maybe we should ask the dancers whether they think of you as a visual artist or a choreographer.
That is a good question.
Actually, that kind of segues into a question. I love that we get to corner you into a question.
I know.
There have been a lot of really well-known dancers that weren't dancers formally trained but became performers. So identifying as a visual artist initially and then working with dancers, having worked with you numerous times, I see you perform and you do lock into a place of performance where everything about you changes, your energy shifts. Do you feel like it's cathartic in any way for you, or does that element allow you to perform, and then does that help influence your future ideas for work?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, for a little bit now. I mean, I used to be in my work a lot, and then I sort of, like, my work got too hard for me, and so I couldn't do it anymore. But I've found myself kind of coming in more and more. I mean, I don't have, I wasn't an actor as a kid. I wasn't a dancer as a kid. So I didn't have that kind of being on stage thing at all. So it's still petrifying for me. But I mean, there was something about doing that. I don't know. I mean, when I was doing Make Ryan a Dancer and actually learning choreography, there was something that I could fuck up, or I don't know if you can say fuck, but mess up. And so that made me really panicked, also because Frank was one of my teachers and it was hip hop and it's really fast and I would get so scared. So I could mess that up. And that wasn't good for me. I feel like I didn't enter into that sort of other space that you're talking about. And maybe with training, continuing that training, I could have. But, what I do in this show, which is flop around and get bruises all over my body, there is something like that. I mean, and also it's such a great way to see you guys, see the piece in the piece. And so that's kind of a way that I get to kind of interact with you guys and anything. Anyways, but it is this great thing, and I have built it into a lot of the most recent pieces where I have a little cameo or something. I mean, one, it gives me something to do during the run, I can hide under the stage, great. Rather than just panicking in the back and that's not productive. So yeah, I mean, it just gives me something to do.
That's it tonight. You're going to have more of a role, I understand.
I do have a little more of a role tonight, yes. So come. I mean, you guys already saw the tights, and it's all tights for me. So.
Next.
Yes.
I love the piece. Thank you very much. It was really amazing. So I want to ask, for you, have you now explored the internet theme enough? Are you done with the internet? Or
are you post-internet?
Right? Oh God, am I post-internet? A lot of people are, I've heard. Every press release is post-internet, I've heard. I mean, one thing that why I wanted to make this piece is because the infiltration of the internet into my life was so kind of seamless. It just all of a sudden, my life had changed in such drastic ways because of it, but you didn't note it. Sort of that utopia sort of dissipated and it sort of became about, I don't know, offers from Groupon that you had to delete or something. It just became very sort of mundane very quickly. But at the same time, it completely transformed the way that we receive information. And so in a way, this piece was about sort of pausing and thinking about, I'm of a generation that remembers pre-internet, but I was young enough to sort of pick it up really quickly. And I think there's a special sort of this piece resonates with people that have that in a way, because we know the transition. My brother who's 19 doesn't know that. So he's like, well, this is just the way I've always thought. Of course, you have all of these different views going on all the time. So I mean, I don't even know what the internet has in store. I don't know what it is, so I can't even say if I'm done because it's not done. So, any other questions?
More questions. Come on, some of you must have seen it, and we really want to know what's going on.
All right.
For example, the first room that I was taken to last night,
Yeah.
which were two girls reciting words.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what those were?
Yes, I can. So they're very sort of familiar pop lyrics, and our goal was to take them so out of their context that you wouldn't recognize them. So, and in fact, you didn't recognize them. You didn't know what they were, and I guarantee you have these songs on your iPod.
What are they?
Cherished by Madonna, Till the World Ends by Britney Spears. Kylie, help me out. What else is there? Oh yeah, We Don't Stop, Miley Cyrus. So like seriously, your playlist.
Yeah.
So you knew all of them, but we tried to do it in a way that you would have absolutely no idea, or maybe you'd catch on at one time. There's this one line in Britney Spears' Till the World Ends where she says, if you want this good bitch sicker than the remix, and everyone's like, I got you. Because it's such a weird line,
Yes.
this good bitch, that usually people catch on at that one, who are versed in pop music, I guess.
But the movements are also quite unlike the rest of the.
Yes. Yeah. The movements are weird. I really put Kylie through it with that one. It's like, actually, I overheard her. She doesn't know I heard her say this. But she's like, yeah, my piece is like, oh, if people don't know dance, it's not going to work. But it's like, Trisha, Fosse, Trisha, which is Trisha Brown and Bob Fosse. So it's like really weird, like, flat movement, and then showtime, and then back to flat, So, I've seen, this is actually my first time working with Kylie, but I've seen her perform before, and I knew she could kind of handle those sort of quick transitions in between the two.
One more question. One last question that will bring it to an organic
right.
end. Oh, that is the organic end.
That was like organic. All right.
Very organic. Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Thank
for
you,
listening.
Claire.